Hi there, everyone. My name is Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney.
And this week we will be talking about established directors getting new movies, brand new directors getting new-ish movies like Michael B. Jordan, and then we're ending on The Mandalorian. And I know that rhyme was a stretch, and no, I'm not talking about Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Fan-Forstic, because Michael B. Jordan was also in that. We're not on our game.
We have a room of writers. We have a room of writers working on this. This was the best they could do.
This was the best our room of writers could do. They had all week to write this.
Yeah, they're not getting Thai food tonight.
Ay. Sorry about that intro, but in any case, welcome. Thank you for listening or watching. This is the Escapist Movie Podcast. Do.
But we don't have band anymore. Is that what you're paying the writers' room with?
We had to
Cuts.
axe the band, unfortunately. Not because we ran out of money, just because they started questioning my rhyming ability, so I fired them.
You gotta show them who's boss.
All right, so first up in the news is Ben Wheatley, acclaimed director. Ben Wheatley, as he is titled in many of his movies, is getting has actually a couple new movies announced. Both I don't know how soon this was announced, but he's getting Tomb Raider 2 and Meg 2: The Trench.
And I kind of adore, that path that we have of directors who are established. They do, again, nice reference back to Fan-Forstic. The idea of the director who starts, does a small little cult weird movie, is immediately picked up by the studios and asked to do this big movie, and then kind of finds their little groove going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And Wheatley is an interesting director. He is a director who is probably best known in Britain for his work with, say, folk horror and kind of that off-kilter kind of horror movies that he did starting out. Movies like, say, Kill List, Down Terrace, Sightseers. I think he did the ABCs of Death as well. I think he did You in that one. The Letter, not the person, Jack. I don't know about your personal involvement with Ben Wheatley. A Field in England as well. And then High Rise. And what's interesting about Wheatley is that, he's done all these low-key, indie, weird, slightly pagan-y, folk horror-y, metaphorical, abstract adaptations of works, riffing on stuff like The Wicker Man and J.G. Ballard and stuff like that. And it's almost immediately he took a small step towards commercial filmmaking when he signed on to do Rebecca, which is Netflix and is arguably one of Netflix's annual aborted Oscar contenders, where it's we hired a director people like to make a movie based on a piece of work that people like. The result was a result. So we're going to release it in the kind of lead up to the Oscar season, but not when we get ready to lay our trump card. So it will fall on the grand scheme of things, maybe slightly after The Devil All the Time, but not quite when we get to Mank, which is a nice ranking system for Rebecca. Right. So, as 2020's Netflix Oscar contenders go.
So Rebecca is another amuse-bouche, another appetizer to whet everyone's palate for the real Oscar season. Okay, all right.
It's great, and I kind of I enjoy how much Netflix are enjoying this, because they are the only game in town this year. It's would you like Rebecca and another trailer for Mank? Yeah.
Mank all the time.
That's it. And we're withholding. It's it's gonna be released in November. No, it's late December. Gonna make you wait for it.
Those beautiful teases. Ooh, I'm tingling with anticipation.
Shiver with anticipation. But yeah, what I like about Wheatley is that for most directors it'd be okay, I found my comfort level there. I'm working with a studio that gave me a lot of creative freedom, gave me a decent budget, and, positioned me as a potential Oscar contender, even if that hasn't materialized, because Rebecca is not going to be an Oscar contender. Let's not get into it that much. However, I love that Wheatley took that big step for a director, and his immediate springboard as the patron saint of British folk horror was, by the way, not only am I going to do a blockbuster film next, I'm going to do 2 blockbuster films next, and they're going to be 2 sequels, and they're going to be 2 sequels to 2 movies that were not particularly well regarded in their initial release. It's that's the a level, like, I kind of admire, there's no middle gear here. It's just like straight, it's 0 to 60 in the space of like 4 seconds.
Right.
And it's just, whew.
Like, I'm going to make sequels to 2 arguably mediocre films. Ha ha!
If we're feeling generous, Jack.
Right?
Like, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
like,
why it's arguably mediocre. I mean, I've only seen Tomb Raider. I for some reason, I did not see The Meg. But I've seen the first Tomb Raider. Arguably, you could argue it's up to mediocre. Maybe.
It's competent. It's basically competent.
Yeah.
It's like if you were structuring a reboot of a franchise property and had like a cardboard like model to follow, that would be it. And you maybe just paint a little bit on the side and say Tomb Raider.
Right.
And it's like, what's Dominic West doing? I don't know. We'll hire him to exposit for a bit. Alicia Vikander, she seems to be popular. Let's just drop her in. And Walt Groggins. Yeah, we'll take Walton Groggins, but like, don't have him do any of the stuff that people like him doing. Can you get him to just play a generic, like, low-key bad guy? It's like,
absolutely.
I don't think we can do that, yeah.
The only thing I remember about the first Tomb Raider is at the end of the movie, Lara Croft is threatening someone inside a helicopter with an arrow from her bow and arrow. She is pointing a bow and arrow at a helicopter, and the helicopter pilot says, "Okay, you got me."
Clearly outgunned. We are like, I'm smart enough to know when I'm beaten.
That's all I remember from the first Tomb Raider.
And it's such a weird thing because it's not like you would imagine that Wheatley would be like, okay, I'm gonna try it. I'll do it once. I'll take presumably because it's the Meg, the boatload of cash that they'll be paying me because it has to be aquatic themed. And I'll do that. And if I enjoy it, I might find that I really like working with like Jason Statham, or I really like working with CGI on this level, or I really just like the fact the studio is like, come up with crazy things to do with like a great white shark that's gigantic. It's
Absolutely.
like, finally I found my groove and I just want to do this for the rest of my natural life. And that I could kind of respect, you know, because there are a lot of directors who have done that. You could argue like Christopher Nolan was like, look at me, I'm the great hope of indie cinema. And then Warner's were like, hey, would you like $200 million to make a blockbuster of your own design? It's like, I would also like to continue doing that for the rest of my natural life. I get like, if Wheatley had done the Meg and had been like, yeah, now I want to do Tomb Raider, I'd be like, I can see that being a progression. But it's there's no halfway, there's no compromise, there's no like, well, what if I dip my toe in the water and this doesn't work? It's like, nope, bet in the house, just I am going to be that's it.
But I can agree with that. Like, I think there can be a lot of fun in this, like, B-C level of movie where he's like, oh, I get to fuck around. I'm making movies. I'm working with actors. No one's super A-list, so we're all just having fun. Like, I can absolutely see that. But like you said, to jump into, like, full body into the freezing water, like, let's do 2 in a row. Mediocre is my starting point. Boom.
Yeah. And like, we don't even know when these are going to be able to start production because of how crazy things are right now.
Right.
So this is presumably he signed away the next 4 years of his life to do these things. Like, which is like, it's a hell of a thing to like arrive on the set of the Meg 2 on the first day and go, this isn't really working for me. And it's like, well, have I got news for you? Look forward to doing this for another 200 weeks, my friend. It's strange.
It is. Well, and,
strange.
you know, Ben Wheatley as a director, you were kind of pitching this news idea, which I thought was interesting. And so I started to and I'm no good with names in general. I can never remember names. So I was like, I started looking up movies that Ben Wheatley has written or directed. And I found out that I had not seen a single thing this man has made, but like 2 or 3 of his movies are constantly on my I should watch that next list, which of course shuffles daily with new movies coming out. But both High Rise and Free Fire are high up on my list. Free Fire specifically, I've heard very good things about. They're high up on my list of movies like, oh, I should see these. These movies are important for some reason or another. I don't know why I think they're important. I don't know if
they're important. Like, I'm not sure important would be the adjective I use. It's like, it really, really put in context the human condition. I feel like it advanced film as an art form. I didn't understand cinema as a medium until I saw Free Fire. That moment where the van ran over the man's head and it exploded. I realized this is what cinema truly is.
I think I want to say Free Fire got on my list because I realized that I hadn't seen many movies with Alison Brie, and I don't know whether or not she's a good actress. Or not Brie.
Not Alison Brie, sorry. Brie Larson.
Brie Larson, yes. I
had the right word.
I've only seen 2 movies with Brie Larson in it, and I don't know if she's a good actress based off of those 2 movies. And so I was like, oh, I should watch some more movies with Brie Larson. People generally consider her to be a good actress.
I'm not sure Free Fire would be the one I'd go to for that, because I actually genuinely, I really like Free Fire. But Free Fire is pretty much Ben Wheatley, like, I'm going to get a bunch of my famous mates around, we're going to shoot on a set for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's going to be just great fun. Some of them are going to have funny accents because actors like doing that. Some of them are going to be dressed in 70s costumes because actors like doing that. I'm just going to be like repeatedly gratuitous and kind of like violent and excessive.
Yeah,
because
I
like
love
doing
that.
that. Yeah, no, it is. Like, for listeners who are not aware, the very brief, non-spoiler introduction to Free Fire is that it basically does what's equivalent to the Reservoir Dogs thing, where Reservoir Dogs takes a small part of a much larger movie and expands it out into an actual movie. So it takes the moment after the job where people split up the loot and figure out what happened and makes an entire movie out of that. Free Fire does that, but with a gun battle. It's basically a 2-hour-long gunfight that unfolds entirely within a warehouse.
This sounds like a perfect movie for me. I'm really excited.
I really loved it. It's such good fun. And like, but the thing about Wheatley, which I find interesting, I have seen more of his movies than you have, and Wheatley is one of those directors that I admire more than I actively like. Again, like Mike Flanagan that we talked about, where it's like but he has a very distinct sensibility, a very distinct voice. He's very good at what he does, and he clearly loves it so much. He edits, I think, all of his films. He writes quite a few of them as well, and he has like this long-term partnership as well. Yeah,
I he writes them with his wife, correct?
Yeah. Like, it's very much like this is very much a literal kind of bespoke filmmaker, and his films, particularly like his earlier films, so films like, say, Sightseers or Kill List, are some of the most wonderfully weird movies I have ever seen. And like, I don't absolutely love Kill List. A lot of critics I know like it a lot more than I do, but even though it's not my jam, I'm like, I kind of admire the fact that this is so singularly the vision of one person. Like, this is very much the product of somebody with a distinct imagination driving it. And I think that's what I find interesting about the kind of the news about the Meg and Tomb Raider 2. Because they're not even like, it's not even like Ben Wheatley makes giant shark movie with Jason Statham, at which point I'd be like, well, I can see maybe Ben Wheatley doing something interesting with like Jason Statham and a giant shark. It's like, no, I'm taking a movie somebody's already made and making a sequel to it.
Yeah.
And same thing with Tomb Raider, where it's like, if he was adapting it from scratch, I'd be like, oh, well, maybe this will be a pagan Tomb Raider, like a folk horror Tomb Raider.
Sure, which would be really cool, by the way.
It would be really cool. She's going to find like a Wicker Man or something. That's the plot base. She's going to raid a Wicker Man. But like, and that sort of stuff would kind of interest me. And I think that like, what's interesting about his filmography is when you get to the movies you mentioned, like High Rise and Free Fire, there's a huge jump in terms of like the technical quality and the financing that he gets. And they become a lot sleeker and a lot cleaner. And they're obviously, High Rise is obviously an adaptation of existing text, but it's still a Wheatley film. Like, it's much more interested in, like, again, occult geometry, which is such a fantastically delightful thing for a man making movies to be interested. It's like, yes, I've decided I'm going to make High Rise, and it's going to be social commentary. Sure, we'll do some social commentary, but it's really about occult geometry. That's what grabs my interest. And it's going to be like, you were going to have like 90 minutes of Jeremy Irons telling you about pentagram designs. Trust me, it's going to be fantastic. I know, like, but he makes those his own. And Free Fire, again, is similar, like, in that he has like Cillian Murphy, Armie Hammer, Brie Larson, Charlotte Copley. He has like actual actors that international audiences recognize, and he makes it his own as well. And I think, and again, this is very broad, very brief. Darren talks about Rebecca moment here, so I'm not going to spoil it in case anybody can spoil a 1938 Daphne du Maurier novel. But just very briefly, my immediate reaction to watching Rebecca was, why is Ben Wheatley making this? Because obviously it's a Daphne du Maurier novel. It's famous as a Hitchcock film from 1940. I think it won Best Picture. It's generally regarded as one of the best movies ever made. And what's interesting about it is, like, Wheatley does the smart thing where he doesn't copy Hitchcock's Rebecca, which is a smart thing to do when you are readapting Rebecca.
Right.
However, he copies Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. He copies Hitchcock's Vertigo. He copies, I think at one point he even like heavily emulates Orson Welles' like The Lady of Shanghai. And it's like,
really?
What? Yeah, there's a lot of like Wheatley drawing in influences, and like, to be fair, they're good influences. They're all like, if you're gonna copy from the best.
Right.
But like watching Rebecca, and like he's a good copier. Like, it's not like kind of like, ooh, they're clumsy. It's like they're actually quite beautifully done. But it's very much like, why this? Why are you doing this, Ben? Why don't you make it in your own way?
Right.
And like part of me wondered if it was, he wanted to get it out of his system and he wanted to do like an homage. Like you're a massive film nerd and you love films and you just like that thing that Martin Scorsese does every once in a while where he'll be like, I want to remake Cape Fear. Boom, there we go. Now I'm going to go make Casino. It's like, okay, back to business as usual. It's like, I'm going to make a kid's film so my daughter can watch it, adapting this book. It's like, good for you, Marty. It's like, then I'm going to make Wolf of Wall Street. It's like, okay, you're back. That's it. That's going to... I'm good that you got to do what you felt you had to do. Now you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, it feels like that, like Rebecca almost felt like that, where it's like, okay, you got it out of your system. Are you going to make another Ben Wheatley film now? And it's like, no.
So you felt that Rebecca was like lacking the Ben Wheatley factor, is I guess what you're saying.
So to speak. Like, I mean, there are little elements there, but you have to squint. So like, again, very brief introduction to Ben Wheatley. What really interests Wheatley is, and I kind of jokingly alluded to it there with High Rise, he's very interested in this idea of what is uniquely British horror, this idea of kind of pagan horror. Okay. And it's slightly different from like conventional American horror, but it's the idea that we owe the land something and the land gives us something back, basically.
Okay.
Think of like The Wicker Man and the idea of the sacrifice in The Wicker Man and the idea that, the land gives and the land taketh away, which is slightly different from the American horror that's related to land and the West and various things like that.
And usually,
which we won't get into.
Usually our horror is just the land is taking away because we did something very bad.
Yes, that's it exactly. Whereas in England, it's like the land is taking away, but we've been here so long that we don't really understand what the land expects of us. And Wheatley's very, very good at that. And like a major recurring motif is like, we've been here so long, we have no idea what we owe to the world around us, and that is going to make us suffer.
Sure, okay.
And like Rebecca has moments of that with Mandalorian. Like there are some really striking sequences, like early on when, the lead character, the anonymous protagonist, is dreaming of Mandalorian, and it's kind of shot with these wonderfully atmospheric lights, and the lighting is striking and the camera movement is bold. Or there's another moment, again, no spoilers, but like where a character imagines themselves being literally swallowed and consumed by the house in which they're living, which again is that very much like that's sort of Wheatley stuff, and that's there, and I'm like, yes, this is how I see Rebecca as a Wheatley film. It's like this woman who goes to this old house which has been established and has been there long before her and will probably be there long after her. No spoilers in the comments for people who actually know the story, but that's how it appears at the start.
Yeah.
But then it becomes like more Hitchcockian. It becomes more, it becomes more generic thriller, and you kind of lose the weirdness that I associate with Wheatley. And I'm kind of like, I'm wondering like how I can see Wheatley's horror maybe working with Tomb Raider, or kind of Wheatley's interest maybe working with Tomb Raider, because that's all about raiding tombs. It's about going in and exhuming and taking stuff out and maybe awakening something that you shouldn't awake, or discovering that something's there and it's primal, and you could do that there.
Yeah.
And like the Meg, I mean, I guess you could say that it's about awakening something primal at the bottom of the ocean, which just so happens to be a gigantic shark that Jason Statham is going to have to stab through the eye with a speedboat. But, I mean, it's a bit of a
I
push.
guess, my question now, hold on, and I'm just looking this up now for the Meg 2. And Ben Wheatley is not credited as a writer for the Meg.
Yeah.
Just director, and I'm looking
very
it up
much work for hire, and not editor either.
Right, and Amy Jump, Ben Wheatley's wife, is writing Tomb Raider, or co-writing Tomb Raider 2.
That makes sense then. That does make sense, because I can see that fitting with like what interests Wheatley as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Although again, this is one of the things where like that might be interesting, because it's always fascinating when you get a director who has like a very particular set of things that they're interested in, and a studio that has given them a lot of money and maybe doesn't understand the things that they're very interested in, and is going to like react to how they bring their interest into the established property. I'm very interested. Like that like Wheatley directing Tomb Raider does admittedly interest me, in that I genuinely hope that the studio trusts him, because if they don't, I can see it getting quite messy. I can see this being one of those, they write books about the post-production afterwards, and it's like, we hear stories about how Ben Wheatley moved into a house with dogs, and it was just a nightmare. Not that I'm referencing any director in particular. Would never do that.
No, I would never do that.
What I will say in defense of Wheatley, and this is something that I find interesting, I think we've alluded to it before, one of the problems that I have with that pipeline of going indie director to blockbuster is that, generally speaking, that's modeled a lot on, say, Christopher Nolan or Steven Soderbergh, particularly Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
And why I think Nolan worked is that his path wasn't actually indie film, gigantic blockbuster. It was indie film, mid-budget adult film that no longer exists anymore, then blockbuster. So it was Memento, Insomnia, and then Batman Begins. And as a
Sure,
result,
sure.
he's talked about how, like, working on Insomnia on a film where there were no stakes, no budget,
Mm.
and like the studio was like, well, we'd like it to be good, but if it's not, that allowed him to work up a relationship with them. And so when he went to Batman, he was like, I understand what I can push and what I can pull, and how that
Mm-hmm.
relationship works, and how to basically make a film like this. And I
Sure.
think that the eradication of the mid-budget adult film, like as a result of summer blockbusters and all that sort of stuff, is a problem, because that means that you don't have that. And so it's very much literally sink or swim. It's grab them by the scruff of their neck and throw them in. So like Taika Waititi was incredibly lucky. He went from doing these tiny, no budget kind of like indie films on the other side of the world to
Yeah.
making a Thor movie, and it worked. And it was incredible. Like, it was incredible.
Well, I think that's also like part of the Marvel machine,
Yeah.
though.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah. Like, there
the
was only so far that he could go off before he would be corrected.
exactly,
Before
and
he
you know,
becomes
like
Alan Taylor.
the the way the Marvel machine is set up is he doesn't need to worry about all the action sequences. They have a team for that.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to worry about this. They have a team
Special
for that.
effects. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, but I do wonder if Tomb Raider 2 and Meg 2 are his mid-budget films. Like
Well, actually, I
they're
was
B
going to say, I
movies.
think like his mid-budget films are arguably like High Rise, Free Fire, and Rebecca.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I think like he has somehow managed to do that, because he's come from such a low level. I love Sightseers. Like, Sightseers is great. I think it's on Shudder in the States.
Oh,
Have a
okay.
look at it if you like British kind of horror, or
Mhm.
British, well, horror comedy, because it's a very unique sensibility. But like, he's gone from doing those to doing movies like Free Fire, which are like a Martin Scorsese presents movie with
Mhm.
Cillian Murphy, Armie Hammer, Brie Larson, and like Charlotte Copley, and it's like, yep, okay. And then he did Rebecca, which is like on Netflix, an almost Oscar contender, with Lily James, Armie Hammer, and Kristen Scott Thomas. And it's
Mhm.
like, it feels like that is enough of kind of like a middle step that I trust he can make the leap upwards. You know, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Well, yeah, I think like our definition of what your middle step is now is slightly different. And like you
Yeah.
said, he's cutting his teeth on television shows. He's doing, Netflix originals. He's doing his, our version of mid-budgets now, which is basically learning how to work within certain constraints, right?
Yeah.
Coming in and directing a couple episodes of Doctor Who has got to be incredibly constraining as compared to making a movie that you also co-wrote.
Yeah.
And so,
There's less pagan sex stuff in those Doctor Who episodes, I will admit. There's a bit less, just a little bit.
listen, if we can get Peter Capaldi shirtless, I'm down for anything. We
And that is podcast episode 100 challenge set, listeners. Well done, Jack.
And we will take that shirtless men and transition to the other new director that we are talking about, which of course is mostly shirtless, Michael B. Jordan. Probably most well known for playing Killmonger in the Black Panther movies, also played Adonis Creed in Creed and Creed 2. Two fantastic films, although I need to say that I am incredibly biased towards all Rocky films because I love them all for very different reasons.
Why would you have to, like, that's a normal thing, Jack? Why,
Oh, okay.
why would you have to explain that? Like, I mean, you don't need to justify yourself.
Well,
we're not talking about Willow here. I'm kidding. Before people in the comments, I'm kidding.
It's for you and me, for movie people, loving every single Rocky movie, including the Creed movies, which are Rocky movies,
Yeah.
is very normal and very well expected. Anyone outside of a movie sphere, if you say like, I love Rocky 4 and 5, they'll say, wait a minute, those were bad movies. And you say, not exactly.
I hope you have a spare hour while I can explain this to
you. See, he was a street fighter, and he got into a street fight at the. Oh, it's great. You can't beat him. He's a street fighter. Okay, hold on. I just went into a little bit of a rocky days. In any case, Michael B. Jordan has been announced as directing Creed 3. This is interesting as Michael B. Jordan has directed literally nothing. He has not directed a short film, a TV show episode. He has never been on that side of the camera outside of a producer role, which is, throwing money at
Yeah.
something.
And convincing somebody to sign up for your film. It's like, well, can I be a producer? Yeah, sure, why not? Just promise you'll appear in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to me, like, good for him. It's always great to experiment. He has a ton of cred within the business on the acting side of things. Good for him, but not even a short film first. Like, I'm incredibly concerned, not really concerned, because, like, I'm sure he's been around long enough where it will be at very least competent. This definitely reminds me of like Star Trek The Next Generation. Once you get into later season, you have actors just directing because, like, why not? Just direct the episode. You know what's going on.
They did have to do boot camp, to be fair, which sounds like the most amazingly tiring thing ever. Boot camp for TV directors.
Right.
But I mean, it's very much kind of a staging board. But again, even then, it's notable that a lot of the Star Trek actors actually transitioned out of acting after Star Trek and became directors. Like Jonathan Frakes,
Yes.
Riker is best known as a director now. I
Absolutely.
think Roxanne Dawson is best known as a TV director now. I think, what's his name, Robert Duncan McNeil, did most of Chuck. I think he's best known as a director as well. So it is kind of interesting that you can make that leap and kind of still become known best as a director. I mean, it is worth noting, like, this isn't unprecedented. The same thing happened with Bradley Cooper on A Star is Born, where he literally just said, I want to direct a movie, and I want Lady Gaga to be in it. And Warner's were like, sure, would you like some money, Brad? He's like, yes, I would like some money. And that kind of came together that way. I think I'm actually quite hopeful or optimistic about the situation with Michael B. Jordan, in large part because he is an actor who has a particularly close relationship with, I would argue, one of the great directors of his generation. He's appeared in all three of Ryan Coogler's feature films. Fruitvale Station, Creed, and obviously Black Panther as well. And, like, it kind of, like, not that I'm suggesting that this will happen, to be clear. I'm not impugning Michael B. Jordan's actual ability as a director. But I imagine, God forbid, things get out of hand, or even just, I'd like some friendly advice.
Right.
Like, having Ryan Coogler on your speed dial and being like, how would you do this? Or, let's say, hypothetically, you were directing a third Creed movie, just throwing it out there, crazy idea, right? What would you do? I'm just like, Michael, are you getting a pen? Do I hear you right? No. We're just talking friends.
We're having a conversation here.
Yeah. But I honestly think that. But the thing is, when you read interviews with Coogler, and particularly when you watch the two of them together in interviews, it genuinely seems like they have that kind of simpatico relationship. And I would not be surprised if Jordan had spent a lot of time, like, we talked about that leap that directors make from indie, mid-budget, blockbuster. And that is exactly what Coogler did. Coogler went from Fruitvale Station, to Creed, which is a mid-budget film by modern standards, to Black Panther, which is like a blockbuster. And at each step of that journey, who made that with him? It was Michael B. Jordan. And I would not be surprised if he had been paying attention as it went and had been kind of like engaged with that. So I'm not as perturbed as I would be if that relationship did not exist. I was, let's put it this way, I was more alarmed when Bradley Cooper, whose like strongest directorial relationship to that point was with Todd Phillips, was like, I would like to direct a movie. That concerned me slightly, and it worked out.
He's been hanging out with David Wayne for a long time. Bradley Cooper has been hanging out with absurdist comedians forever.
Yeah, to be fair, I think to give Cooper credit, it's Eastwood. I think he cites Eastwood was the director that he learned from, and that makes sense because Eastwood, like, Eastwood has his problems, which we're not going to get into. But like,
dang it.
Eastwood, I kind of admire Eastwood as a director because he seems like a director who's like very focused on what he wants, very clear in how he's going to get it, and like is always able, and keep in mind he's at the age of 80 at this stage, 80 something, and he's like, I honestly believe the story that he clocks off at 3:00 every day and goes play around at golf. And you know what? I think he's earned it. And I think that's not a bad thing if you're at 80 directing movies and you've got it down to so fine an art. You're like, yep, off to play golf. See you in post.
I don't care if the baby looks bad. I have a round of golf.
Yeah. we'll fix it in post, or
we'll
won't.
fix it in post, or we won't, and everyone will make fun of me for it.
Yeah, Best Picture nomination.
And really, like, I think any actor who has been in as many movies as Michael B. Jordan has been in can, at very least, fake it through one movie. Indie budget, mid-budget, whatever. Like, if you've just been around enough sets, you can get there. Like, you can limp across the finish line. It might not have a directorial flair. It might not have your personality, which obviously takes several iterations of a film in order for you to develop a personality as a filmmaker. But I think he can get the job done no matter what. But like we were just talking about, like making that jump from, college short to small, like micro indie film to mid-budget to blockbuster. He is jumping right in with an established franchise. Now, to be fair, that established franchise has had many, many ups and downs.
Yeah. Now it's not like they're handing him the key to like the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jack. Like right. They're handing him to the keys to the franchise. Whereas you pointed out, if you say you like all of them, people go, "Really?"
Yeah, even the one with Mr. T. Yes, the one with Mr. T.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I feel like there's obviously the capacity for failure there, and I think like the Creed franchise so far has done very, very well, and I think they're both really good movies. I think the first one is one of the best franchise films of the new millennium by a significant margin. It is a staggering legacy sequel. I think that Creed is like the gold standard of those kind of movies.
100%, yes.
Yeah, but I do think that, like, it's not. If this goes wrong, and to be clear, I do not see it going wrong, and if it does go wrong, I see it going wrong in a sense of it being fairly generic and forgettable rather than it being like a shit show. But if it does go wrong, I see it being a situation where it's like, well, look, Rocky 3 wasn't great, but hey, Rocky 4, am I right? Am I right?
Fair enough. I think that's a very like middle of the road. Like, yeah, I'm not. Maybe it is just my love of all of the Rocky movies, including Creed, that like makes me feel like they're bigger than they are or more important than they are. But no, I think no matter what, like the Rocky formula. This is now I got to remember that Coen Brothers movie where he needs to write a wrestling film.
Oh, Barton Fink.
Yes, this is Barton Fink. We're like, okay, you seem like a competent guy. We're gonna give you a wrestling picture, right? And so, like, the
Who's
Rocky
the John Goodman in this scenario?
Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, probably Sylvester Stallone. I have some ideas for a plot. How about they don't fix the light outside my house, and I gotta call the city inspector?
Okay.
I think that we need to build on that. I think that can be a runner. Creed. I like Creed 2 a lot, but its handling of Rocky was interesting.
It's Stallone. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll let Stallone do what he wants to do, and we'll just edit the footage we have. So Sylvester, is the lamp like that's not working outside your house? Is it a metaphor for anything? Is it meant to like come back at the end of the film? Does it tie into anything? Like, I don't know. Fix in post. That's like,
I just, that happened to me in real life. I thought it'd be interesting to put in a movie.
Yeah, slice of life, naturalism, right? That's what we're going for, naturalism. It's like.
So yeah, no, I like, to me, I'm excited. I think, and I also like, I think it's important for any actor, as someone who has been on all sides of a camera and all sides of a production. I feel like the more you can hang out in a world that you're not used to, the more respect you have for that, even if you no longer do it. So like if Michael B. Jordan, directs and never directs again as an actor, he will now understand the other side of the camera a little bit better, which can only do him good as an actor.
I think Robert De Niro kind of thing, where De Niro directed a couple of films and then just sort of stopped.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. He did kind of like The Good Shepherd, I think, and stuff like that. And he did he did This Boy's Life as well. And he then kind of decided, not really what I want to do, not really my thing. Glad I did it, but yeah, just gonna go appear in Bad Grandpa, and The War with Grandpa, which are two separate franchises, to be clear.
Oh Lord. Well, and really, like, listen, Michael B. Jordan is a talent, but he is also known as a super hot, ripped dude. And eventually, we all get old, and you need to fall back on something.
I kind of that is possibly the hottest take on the hottest man, where it's like those looks ain't gonna last forever, Michael.
He's so attractive.
I am
Listen,
fairly sure those looks will last forever, Jack. I am fairly certain that like he's set now. It's pretty much he will be like when he's playing like when he's transitioned into like the old mentor roles. You'll be like,
yeah.
That old mentor's like unnaturally attractive. Like why is the Obi-Wan Kenobi in this movie like super ripped?
Am I supposed to be attracted to the old mentor? I don't think I'm supposed to be. This is weird. This is weird.
Yeah. It's like Paul Newman kind of thing, where it's like there's always that aspect of Paul Newman where it's like, yeah, sure, he's playing grandpa, but he seems like there's something going on there.
All right, you're right. No, you're right. I take it back. I rescind my snarky comment about Michael B. Jordan's looks. And transition into the good-looking Mandalorian.
Smooth.
Yes, I pulled it out.
But not on the podcast. We've talked about this, Jack.
I might be in pajama pants. You don't know what I'm wearing down there. That's not true. It's very cold in Milwaukee at this very moment. I am wearing several layers. It is so cold here already. In any case, The Mandalorian Season 2 about to come out. Season 1, I don't know if we can consider Season 1 to be a surprise hit, but I feel like the movies have been having this weird, like, polarization, lukewarm reception. Obviously, The Last Skywalker was its own particular kind of shit show. And
The Rise of Skywalker, though, I do like that you combine the two movies together.
Oh, crap, what did I say?
The Last Skywalker. I am going to be very careful in how I call you on that, because I understand that if I do one thing, the comment section will go wild. So I will just observe that, yes, The Rise of Skywalker was a mess.
It was. Even if you don't think it was a mess, it's been polarized.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
In general, people have very strong feelings on either side. No one thinks that any of those movies are just okay.
Fine, sure, why not?
And then
those lots of people have that opinion. They just don't talk about it on the internet.
I suppose that's fair. Yeah. That's fair, but we live on the internet, so those opinions don't matter.
I know.
But then The Mandalorian comes out and is universally praised by general audiences, by critics, by hardcore Star Wars fans, by new Star Wars fans. Everyone loves The Mandalorian. Baby Yoda. It's a hit. It's a hit, and personally, I think it's a fantastic show. That being said, Season 1, if we look at other things that were universally loved, something like Stranger Things. Season 1 is universally loved, but had no expectations going in, and now there are expectations coming to Season 2.
Yeah, I wish this... I think I mentioned this before, but I wish I liked The Mandalorian more than I do. I am glad that it exists. I'm glad that people enjoy it. I'm glad that, in a fandom that is as fractious and kind of like, turbulent, let's use that euphemism, as Star Wars fandom, that there was something that everybody got together and enjoyed and appreciated, and nobody, got really unpleasant about the fact that other people enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But I think my issue with The Mandalorian is that the first season felt very samey and quite generic-y, and a lot of the stuff there felt very routine. I don't want to say paint by numbers, because like the best thing about it was the production. Like you can tell that it was made by people who love Star Wars, and I'm not just talking in terms of Favreau, who obviously loves Star Wars, but in terms of like the production, the detailing, the production design is amazing. The special effects are lovely. The costuming, the aliens, it's all like really fantastically put together. Mm-hmm. But watching it, I just remember being like, this would be a pretty decent like 2.5 hour movie. Mm-hmm. Like if you just honed it down a bit, if you didn't have a lot of stuff that felt like it was padding, a lot of stuff that felt like it was just generic Star Wars stuff. Like, so for example, in episode 4, we do like let's do the Seven Samurai because no other science fiction story has ever done the Seven Samurai. Or, episode 6, which is let's do a prison break with a bunch of characters that we have never met before and will never meet again. But hey, we'll get to have some familiar aliens in there and some nice production design. Or episode 5, where it's like, hey, let's go to Tatooine, and there'll be a bar, and the band will play there. And people will like that because it's from the original Star Wars. There was a lot of that going on there. It was like, just give me the fun stuff. Give me, like, cute little adorable baby Yoda. Give me, like, Werner Herzog talking about how much he loves the baby. It's utterly, utterly beautiful. Give me, like, moments like that. Give me, like, Giancarlo Esposito as, Moff Gideon. Like, give me that stuff. And take away the padding and the generic stuff and the, a reminder that you are watching Star Wars. Like, watching it often felt like the screen would flash up and say, just a reminder in case you've forgotten, you're watching Star Wars. Like, that was my kind of big problem with it, was that it didn't feel ambitious. It didn't feel like it was pushing forward. It didn't feel like it was doing anything especially new or exciting or bold, or like that it was pushing any boundaries or doing anything new with Star Wars. Because it's like, if I feel nostalgia for classic Star Wars, well, look, I know that, like, the original cuts of Star Wars are not easily or readily available legally, and we could not condone any other way of getting access to them on this podcast, to be clear.
Certainly not the despecialized edition, which is a fan-made project taking out all the special effects in beautiful 4K now. The despecialized edition,
which we could never condone.
We could never condone or even talk about that.
No, we couldn't. That would be immoral. But the despecialized edition that you mentioned is something that we could never bring up. But even discarding the despecialized edition, which we could never bring up, I can watch on streaming or on DVD or on Blu-ray. I can watch the old Star Wars movies whenever I want. So it's like, if I want new Star Wars content, don't I want it to be new? Don't I want it to do more? Don't I want it to take what I know and, like, push it further? And that was, like, my big problem with season 1 of The Mandalorian.
Here might be my very hottest Star Wars take ever.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
Outside of the original Star Wars, what we know now as A New Hope, I don't think Star Wars can be anything other than expected middle-of-the-road mediocre.
Sorry, you just knocked me back.
I feel like quite literally, the essence of Star Wars is, what if we made a big budget version of a crappy sci-fi movie? That is literally what George Lucas said he wanted to make. That's it. That's what Star Wars is. And, like, the first one, A New Hope, is novel because it was a big budget. It was very competent. It had
incredibly well produced. Like, the production design is astounding.
Yes. Astounding. And so, like, what George Lucas has done elevating this niche genre of sci-fi is beautiful and commendable, but that can no longer happen within Star Wars because now it is also a commercial product and IP. If we fans of sci-fi are looking, I'm smacking. I am a
He's
hand
getting very
talker.
passionate.
No, I'm a hand talker, Darren, and my microphone is right here, and so I have to, like, do all sorts of kung fu moves in order to talk, which is very difficult for me. But in any case, Star Wars can never get outside of its own comfort zone, because if it ever does, the fans will rebel. This is just on me. I personally think that The Last Jedi is a fantastic movie. It gets a little muddled at the messaging in the end, but overall it's a very fantastic movie. And I think what it does with its themes is outside of the Star Wars realms, and that's why hardcore fans got mad, even though it was a fantastic movie. So what The Mandalorian is doing is taking us back to that mid-range. You know what you're going to get. We're not breaking any rules. We're going to use characters you know, and we're going to make it a cheesy serial flick.
Yeah.
And that's what people want. And
No, I'm not complaining. It's a very well-made kind of serial thing. And, like, again, very charming cast, arguably somewhat overqualified cast given the material they're given, if we're being frank. Like the production design is outstanding,
Mm-hmm.
and it does capture that kind of, it's that memory of Star Wars, what you remember Star Wars being rather than what Star Wars was, which is an
Yes.
impressive bit of work. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Again, this is one of the things where I find myself being like, I don't know. I wonder, is that cynical? Is what you're saying kind of cynical in that, like, I
Yes.
mean, yes, it is. Okay, that's great. I just wanted to clear that. I just want to be clear on that. But like, yeah, that like I actually have the same thought about Star Wars as well as you. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
bit slightly more optimistic in that I'm like, I think The Empire Strikes Back was something different than Star Wars. It pushed the boundaries of what Star Wars could be, but it arrived before everybody had decided this is what Star Wars is, and so got folded into that. Like, if
Oh,
you
okay.
release The
Sure.
Empire Strikes Back like 20 years later, it would
Mm-hmm.
get the reaction, yeah, okay, I'm not going to. I'm thinking about doing something that I know will make people very angry. I'm not going to do that. But let's just say that there were hypothetically a Star Wars movie that was really liked by people who are like critics and let's say
Mm-hmm.
general audiences. And let's say it was the most successful and highest grossing movie its year, and maybe hypothetically like the best selling Blu-ray of the following year. Let's say that
Mm-hmm.
that was a hypothetical Star Wars movie that
Sure.
existed around about 2017, directed by like an indie director who maybe did a couple of movies like, I don't know, say Brick or Knives Out, something like that. Let's say that movie existed. And
Okay.
yeah,
Very hypothetical here,
it's
but
just
yeah.
abstract. I can't even think of what it would be called,
Of course. Yeah.
But let's just say that movie existed,
Mm-hmm.
and it generated a certain remark against it by a certain kind of Star Wars fan who got very invested in whether it did or did not represent the spirit of what Star Wars was. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like if you had released The Empire Strikes Back 20 years later, it would generate a similar response where people would be like, this is a great movie. This is a very well made movie. This is
Mm-hmm.
perhaps a little bit unfocused in its storytelling in that its characters go absolutely everywhere. It's a bit messy in the middle. Its ending doesn't exactly resolve anything. It doesn't bring everything back in the way it expected to, but it's bold and it's saying provocative and interesting things. And gee whiz, it looks even prettier than the last Star Wars movie because everything's suddenly
Mm-hmm.
white and grey and shiny, and the Empire finally managed to afford polish. And so it looks really, really no, like that's the like I genuinely quick sidebar here. What I adore about The Empire Strikes Back is that it's such an 80s movie because it's very much like the original Star Wars is like post Watergate, post Vietnam. It's like everything's fallen to pieces.
Yep.
Everything's made of rust. Everything looks like it's been bolted on with a bolt gun. And then like The Empire Strikes Back arrives, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously you're inside the Star Destroyers for the first time, so in canon it has always been like this, just to be
Right.
clear. But like
Yeah.
in the context of this being a movie that was released in cinemas in 1980, it's like the 80s have arrived. Like Darth Vader's helmet is quite literally polished. That's not a
Mm.
euphemism, by the way. But Darth Vader's helmet has been polished so clear that you can see people's reflection in it. Like
Oh
the
yeah. No, we go
uniforms
to
are green.
Cloud City, which is made of cocaine, baby.
Yeah, quite literally. But like it is so 80s, and I love that. Like it's you could tell immediately watching. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously you rationalize in universe and you say, oh well, we just didn't see that stuff in New
Yeah.
Hope. But it's like, yeah, no, behind the scenes the 80s arrived. And like I genuinely love that, and I feel like if Empire Strikes Back hadn't arrived immediately 3 years later,
Mm-hmm.
like within the childhood of people who had watched A New Hope as children and kind of like
Yes.
imprinted on them and been, this is Star Wars, I think that it would have generated a polarizing response. And in fact, actually, if you look at like studies and surveys that have been conducted, interviews
Mm-hmm.
with people who watched it as children, you'll note that a lot of the criticism, a lot of the immediate visceral reaction from fans watching The Empire Strikes Back is,
Mm.
well, these twists and developments about like suddenly people are related or not related to other people, and that doesn't feel like it was set up in the previous film. I don't really get that. What's he doing there? That's the general tone of like interviews that you get when you
Yes.
read about Star Wars, like from people
Mm-hmm.
who were interviewing fans in 1980. So I do think I think you are, I think there is merit to the argument that you are making.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to consider myself an optimist in the sense that I think that
I
maybe change is good and maybe we
I
shouldn't be terrified of it.
I feel like change is good, and I feel like the Star Wars universe has a lot of stories to tell. But I also feel like the Star Wars universe is incredibly limited in the stories that the audience will accept. And so I like, to me this is a us not being able to have our cake and eat it
Yeah,
too, which
yeah.
is, I think, yes, you should be able to tell a Star Wars story in any genre. Take a side character, make a little movie. Take this, make a little movie. But we know now that it doesn't always work, even within the same continuity. Looking at you, Rogue One, it doesn't necessarily always gel. You can't take a property and then try to siphon off of it something new without also trying to sell it to the same people that you siphoned the property off of and make it different. And so, like, the Mandalorian, to me, the most brilliant part of the Mandalorian is they say, listen, we get it. We know who this is for. We're not deviating too much. We're gonna poke at the corners. We're gonna tell stories people know we're gonna tell. We're gonna rip from the sources you know we're gonna rip from, and we're just gonna make it look good and have fun doing it, and that's why it works. And I don't think you can do anything else. Like, I know we've had, like, for example, I know people really like some of the television shows,
the Clone Wars and stuff like that as well. That sort of thing, with the animated ones,
the Clone Wars, the Rebels, the
expanded universe stuff, like say the comics by Kieran Gillen, for example. But even going back earlier than that, the Dark Horse ones, Timothy Zahn's. Timothy Zahn did the Thawne trilogy, which I quite enjoyed. Stuff like, say,
those aren't canon anymore, right?
Okay. Doesn't mean they're not good, Jack.
I agree.
No, okay, actually, you know what I mean, though. Like, I mean, as in, like, there's a long history of there being a secondary market where you can do interesting things with Star Wars. And it just, I don't know, I'm disheartened that that secondary market. And I guess, look, maybe if I were mounting a defensive, I'd say defense. The Mandalorian doesn't need a defense. As we like,
no, everyone loves it.
You and I both really like it, and everybody else loves it. Like, it's not as if we're not even picking on it. We're like, we like it, but we have some, like, questions we'd like to ask it, or we feel like we want to have a conversation with it where we get a bit more in depth, and rather than just going, hey, you're great, keep doing what you're doing. But I mean, I feel like, so, like, not to mount a defense of it, but if you are making an argument for the validity of what it's doing entirely, it is consolidating. It is very much like, however people outside certain corners of fandom thought of the movies that came out, let us accept that at the very least, The Rise of Skywalker was a poorly reviewed movie that generated the lowest cinema score in the franchise, was not the highest grossing movie in the year that it was released, and various other factors along those lines as well, and that maybe there's an argument to be made for consolidating the franchise, for trying to solidify the base once again, for saying, doing something. And again, this is a comparison that is going to make a lot of people very angry, but similar to what they did with J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens in 2015, where a large part of what The Force Awakens was, and why it was, I would argue, so aesthetically conservative, was because so much of the immediate reaction to the prequels was, dear God, that's not Star Wars! Like, for 6 straight years, dear God, what have you done? You killed Star Wars! You've assaulted my childhood! You made my childhood! You retroactively traveled back in time and did terrible things to my childhood! And, like, because instead of drawing, because there are very serious problems with it, and it's not, they're not great movies. Let's not jump into prequel apologia so completely. But let's also accept that, like, the reason why The Force Awakens is A New Hope 2.0 is in large part because the position was to tell everybody they're not like those movies that were so polarizing all those years ago. They're like the ones from your childhood. And then when that's done, let's do something new and interesting. And I think if you were doing that with The Mandalorian, I think that's the argument for The Mandalorian, is that, like, you've done this thing that was turbulent, controversial, and polarizing, and you've said, okay, well, let's bring the base back together. Let's do Star Wars stuff. And I would hope that you would then use that as a springboard to do new stuff, interesting stuff, bold stuff.
Yes.
And I think this is a nice point to segue into talking about what we hear or know about season 2. Possibly.
Well, and it's like, this is what worries me is we've had a situation where they said, no, Star Wars, Force Awakens, Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then they tried to springboard
And it's like,
And
no, yeah,
and
no,
though
no.
all of the judges said technically yes, you have performed admirably. Yes, technically you did great. The crowd reaction wasn't the best. Yeah, and so with The Mandalorian season 2, while I might enjoy if they try to springboard someplace new, I don't know if everyone will.
My concern is not that they're going to try to springboard somewhere new. My concern is based on what we've heard and the rumors and the speculation. And this is probably a safe point to put one of those nice little cool spoiler warnings down here, just in case.
Sure.
Keep in mind, Jack and I have not seen the season, to be absolutely clear, unless Jack is holding back and is a very good poker face. But neither of us has seen the second season. I don't have the
contacts. I'm known amongst a particular set of very vocal Star Wars haters. They would actually, like, if they could, they would make me watch Star Wars later.
I kind of love the idea that your Disney Plus like has a delay on it. It's like,
I know who he's involved with. No, you get it 2 weeks later than everyone else.
IP addresses are fantastic. But yeah, so we have not seen the second season yet. All of what we will be talking about will be based on publicity stuff that's in the news. So if you have been on a Star Wars site recently, you will probably know what we're talking about already. We're not going to spoil it for you. If you are going in blind, now may be a moment to stop listening or to consider
Absolutely.
listening. Or to listen after you've watched the first episode or, whatever.
Yeah, and I can put a little time code at the bottom where we will stop talking about rumor, spoilery, possible spoilery stuff. Hey there, everyone. This is Jack editing the episode. If you want to skip all spoilers, even minor ones, head over to the 1 hour, 25 minute, 27 second mark. Thanks. Back to the show. But here we go. Go ahead, Darren.
So, the big news and the big rumor coming out of the second season of The Mandalorian is that it is going to feature lots of characters that you love. Rosario Dawson is going to play Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, and I like Ahsoka. I think Ahsoka's a great character. Boba Fett is coming back, and I kind of want to have a conversation about Boba Fett, but we'll leave that. We can have
as long a conversation about Boba Fett as you want.
Yeah, but like it feels like the big selling point for season 2 is here are like we've consolidated, and it's already pretty tight. Yeah. We're going to consolidate even further. We're going to shrink the circle even more. It's we're not only are we trying to recapture the feeling or sensation of A New Hope, which, at least we're doing by creating mostly new planets, by creating a new character who just happens to wear the same costume as Boba Fett, but is a completely different character at least. Now we're just going to pull the stops out and we're just going to go, actually, Beckett, we're going to open the nostalgia doors. We're going to give you this character from this tie-in show that you really like. And I say this, I really like Ahsoka. I genuinely like the Clone Wars quite a lot. I'm not complaining about her coming in and besmirching the canon or anything like that. It's more just nostalgia. And then it's Boba Fett. And we'll talk about Boba Fett in a moment, but Boba Fett is Star Wars continuity history, crack cocaine. It's when you want to...
Fett, Boba Fett is literally everything wrong with Star Wars. We'll get into that more later.
Okay. I feel like you should talk about Boba Fett first. But yeah, no, it feels like we're kind of it's already a small circle, which is similar to the circle you described, which is Star Wars is A New Hope. And there's only so far we can wander within that. And the furthest reach of that includes a reference to the Seven Samurai, and then we're just pulled right back into the middle. Except this reference to the Seven Samurai has a chicken walker in it, because of course it does.
But it's using A New Hope's formula, which is a classic story, the hero's journey that we're just going to do it in our own little corner. But now they've opened the door to say, come on, we're going to play with all your favorite toys.
Yeah, that's exactly. And it's no longer just a corner. The corner is now getting crowded with toys that you've already seen other people play with, and you already enjoyed watching other people play with. And it's but what about these new toys that you had? What about these new characters? What about these, the little new ideas? What about Moff Gideon and the idea of reestablishing the Empire, or living in a world where the Empire has fallen but no galactic power has yet risen up to create it, which is, by the way, a very potent metaphor for what it feels like living in 2020. But this stuff that is potentially interesting, and it's no, you're getting Ahsoka and you're getting Boba Fett and you're gonna enjoy it.
and you're gonna enjoy it. These are the things you want. We know what you want because we have toys to sell. Right. And so like you have the season 1 of The Mandalorian took place in its own little corner, and like you so eloquently put earlier, evoked a lot of the same feelings as the original Star Wars, but for modern sensibilities. I know I often talk about this with video games, with stuff like Doom 2016 and The Legend of Zelda: The Breath of the Wild, which evoke the same feelings as the original Doom and the original Legend of Zelda, but are for more modern audiences, and that is a hard trick to pull off. But yes, now they're bringing in Boba Fett, who is the worst part of the Star Wars universe.
Okay, I'm going to do a Boba Fett thing that is going to make nobody happy. All right? It's going to be quite an accomplishment. Okay. I think Boba Fett, as he appears in the original Star Wars films, and arguably in the prequels as well, is actually a fantastic character. And the problem is how he has been handled outside of that. Boba Fett is the rare Star Wars character, and what I would argue what makes a truly great Star Wars character, and it's a feature that he has in common with, and this is going to make a lot of people also very angry, Darth Vader and Snoke, is that basically he is a character who, when you are a kid, is the most amazing, badass character. He has a cool costume. He has, he doesn't have a cool voice like Snoke or like Darth Vader, but he has like a jetpack. Like, come on. When you're a kid, having a jetpack's cool.
He's got a grapple hook. He's got a cool ship.
Yeah, he's dressed in like camouflage, so it's like an army, so he's also cool. He has his own ship, like Darth Vader has his own special TIE fighter. That's also cool. Like we're told how much of a badass he is continually. And when you're a kid, you love hearing people talk about how other people are badasses. It's even better than watching them be badasses, because when you're a kid, or at least when I was a kid, like the best, you didn't want to be a badass because being a badass was good. You wanted to be a badass because other people said you were a badass. Yes. And that brought you like street cred. So like everyone talking about how cool Boba Fett was made him cool by design. Like as a kid, just perfect. And again, production design. So much of what you talk about Star Wars is like he looks amazing. Like, he looks genuinely great. You would almost swear, Jack, and I mean almost swear, that he was designed to, like, sell action figures with that design. Like, you'd almost, like, that, if you didn't know any better, you'd assume, like, he had been focus grouped and created in an idea that, like, children would love to buy a toy of this thing. But we do, so let's not get into that.
You would almost think, like, the creator of this series found some weird loophole where he got all of the money from toy sales, and people didn't understand that toy sales were about to be a huge thing, and so he started designing characters specifically to sell toys so he could make more money. But, I mean, we're just talking crazy now.
That's crazy. But, and this is what I think makes Boba Fett a great character, like Darth Vader, and, when you get older, and when you come back to the series, and when you watch the series, the character, it becomes very evident very quickly. The character is in no way, shape, or form a badass. He is a child's idea of what a badass looks like. And, like, I think this is genius. I think this is absolutely intentional. So think of, like, Darth Vader in A New Hope. Like, when the Millennium Falcon swoops in and shoots at him, and, like, he just swirls off into the void, like Dick Dastardly. Like Dick Dastardly and Muttley being kind of swept away. Think of, like, the little temper tantrums that Darth Vader throws. Like, when Grand Moff Tarkin's like, oh, come on. We all know who's in charge here. Like, Darth Vader is, like, a drama queen.
Darth Vader is Team Rocket. Like, he is the buffoon of A New Hope, literally blasting off again at the end.
Like, like David Prowse is amazing. His body, people talk about James Earl Jones. Prowse's body language as Vader is amazing because he is such a drama queen. Like, even the sequence when he's introduced stepping over the dead bodies of, like, the rebel troopers at the start of A New Hope. But think about, like, the sequence where he sets up to ambush Han Solo in Cloud City. Think about how carefully Vader had to, like, plan that down to the last detail. How much careful preparation and orchestration had to go into that.
Make sure that the food is all set out. I have a whole thing I'm going to say.
Should I be standing or sitting? Think about this. It's like
standing. Okay, now what's my lines here? Care to join us for dinner? Oh, that's a little on the nose. I don't know. I'll workshop this.
Yeah. Now remember your cue, Lando. This is very important. But like this idea that Vader is, and like people talk about how that's retconned in the prequels, and they turn him into a whiny so and so. But like even if you watch the movie separately, he sounds like James Earl Jones, who has this incredible deep voice. So you're immediately like, this guy is awesome. And then you watch Prowse's body language, and Prowse's body language is amazing. And you're like, this guy owns the room. This guy's like, his primary concern isn't crushing the rebels. It's making sure that people know that he's fabulous. And like
he wears a goddamn cape in space, man.
And he doesn't even own a Cloud City made of cocaine. Like Lando's cape makes sense in that context.
Absolutely.
But like the thing with Boba Fett is, like, the one thing that Boba Fett does that makes him the best bounty hunter in space is that after Han Solo mysteriously disappears after appearing to charge at the Star Destroyer and like not crash into them while having a malfunctioning hyperdrive, is he just waits around a little bit after all the other bounty hunters go their separate ways. And he's like, hey, actually, bingo, gotcha. That's the one thing that Boba Fett does in the entire 3 Star Wars movies that merits him being a badass. Other than that, he just loiters around, throws a little kind of like, he has a little kind of like a temper tantrum thing with Vader when they're in Bespin, and he's like, you know, just so we're clear, I'm bringing him back to my boss, right? So, oh, you'll get what you want.
Right.
Yeah, you know, there's only one room for one queen here, thank you very much. But like, and then you have like the opening of Return of the Jedi, I have very mixed feelings about Return of the Jedi as a film, but I think its treatment of Boba Fett, where he's portrayed as like this incredibly incompetent buffoon, is kind of brilliant. Because you've had 3 years after The Empire Strikes Back, you've had 3 years of people buying Boba Fett toys, and all of a sudden, this gigantic sentient action figure, who with presumably terrible peripheral vision, uncomfortable costuming to be wearing in the middle of the Tatooine desert, and a jetpack that seems highly impractical in a universe where you can just like fly a barge or an X-wing instead. All of a sudden, all of those things become incredibly incredibly useless and dangerous to him very quickly, and he gets swallowed by a sand snake. And I kind of adore that. And the same thing happens in Attack of the Clones, where you have Jango Fett, who's like the most terrible bounty hunter who's ever lived. It's like, no, Samuel L. Jackson just chopped his head off. And
like really easily, yeah.
Yeah.
No, listen, and this is why, all these things you're talking about is why Boba Fett is the worst character ever, because we are talking about the most badass bounty hunter in the entire galaxy that dies to a Three Stooges bit. Yeah. And yet has a bigger Wikipedia page than some American presidents.
Yes. That's it. Like, that's what bothers me. It's the fact that like people act as if like that isn't like the fact that Boba Fett dies in a Three Stooges bit is a problem. It's like, no, that's the punchline to a really great joke.
Well, no, and so like to me, the reason and this is my problem with the fan base in general is how awesome people think Boba Fett is when it's just like, no, he's just some schmuck who died because he wasn't looking both ways. Like, but the fans have held him up to such a pedestal that they cannot accept that he's an idiot. I love it. And so like to me, that like he embodies everything wrong with the Star Wars universe. Like we were talking about, I would love the Star Wars universe to be expanded, but it never will, because of the fans who insist that Boba Fett is actually a badass, and the fans who asked that Darth Vader have a Jason Voorhees-esque murder everyone scene right before he walks onto the ship in A New Hope, where he's stumbling over things.
He's kind of tired. He's all tuckered out, Jack. It's like he's had a busy day at the office. It's like, all that slashing and murdering really got him worn out. He's like, that's why he's so like dramatic. It's like,
like we just with the family, we just did a little Star Wars marathon where we watched them in chronological order, all the Star Wars movies in chronological order, and my children had never seen the prequels before because I refused to show them to them.
That's responsible parenting, Jack. I admire it.
Thank you. And I cannot tell you how jarring it is going from Rogue One to A New Hope. It is mind mind-boggling what different characters those two Darth Vaders are.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, it's strange because, like, the moment... I actually really like the first 2 acts of Rogue One. The moment with Ben Mendelsohn's character where you have, like, the choke me daddy moment, which is like... That's such a great moment because it's like, yep, this is kind of the Vader that I know, and this is the dynamic that I expect from him. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, yep, it's the slasher in the dark, and it's like, maybe dude should, like, I don't know, have a coffee before he, like, boards the blockade runner afterwards or something. Take a breather. That's
right. Like, do you need a little time to meditate because you show up 5 minutes later and you are done. Like, you just got nothing left in the tank, and so like. That to me has always been the issue with Star Wars is like fan perception and reality of a character. And so with knowing that Boba Fett is going to show up, we don't know how much he's going to show up. Like what?
I don't think we're going to get Three Stooges Boba Fett. I would love it if Jon Favreau went full Three Stooges Boba Fett.
He's going to be the unrelenting badass. And when does this take place in the timeline again? I always forget.
After Return of the Jedi, 5 years after Return of the Jedi, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So like he'll have
he's literally been spitted out. Well, I mean, to be fair, the expanded universe already did this. I mean, we the expanded universe already explained how that happened, Jack, and obviously it wasn't a good day for him, and obviously it was part of just a longer game that he was doing. And Boba Fett was so badass that despite the fact that Jabba the Hutt's been using the Sarlacc as a torture mechanism for decades at this point, presumably, he was just able to like recover from that like it was no real thing. He's just
so badass.
He walked it off because he was so badass.
He's just the most badass person.
Yeah, and I mean, like to be fair, like I think there is a room, there's room for a polarity of opinions. There's like, there's no right or wrong way to interpret a particular work of fiction. I do find myself frustrated when one particular approach is consistently pushed and it's the approach that is least interesting or compelling. It's the path of least resistance, or the one that is very much dictated by the consensus of a very strongly dedicated group of people. That, I wonder how many people outside the fandom think Boba Fett's amazing, versus how many of them think he was a cool toy and that bit in Return of the Jedi was very funny. That's my question. Like how strong are the core Boba Fett is the bestest kind of group, versus how much are, well, I remember him. I don't really have any strong opinions, but he looked cool. And I kind of like.
Wait, doesn't Boba Fett have that new TV show now? I think that's a lot of people. Yes.
He's played by that guy from Game of Thrones, but at least he's wearing a helmet, so they can't crush his skull this time. Practical. Headwear is practical.
Right. No, and I think, I keep smacking my microphone, so I apologize to all of the listeners now. But I think that's a problem in any fandom, is there is a very vocal minority which will always dictate the conversation, regardless of box office looking at The Last Jedi. And so I don't know what I want from The Mandalorian, but all I can hope is that they continue to do things that they think is a good idea and not listening to any of the fan base. It is never a good idea to listen to the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, like, I genuinely like Jon Favreau. He seems like he is a nice guy. He seems like he's reliable. He seems like he's sturdy. He enjoys what he's doing, and he's having a great time. And he is generally, Iron Man 2 aside, a competent filmmaker. And I mean, I have a soft spot for,
It's competent.
It is. Okay. But is it competent? Well, I think there's a let's not turn this into the Iron Man 2 podcast. I think there's a larger discussion to be had about what was happening on Iron Man 2. But I love this. But just in case people aren't riled up enough. But I think that, like,
take it back.
And The Lion King, which is its own separate thing, because The Lion King is like the 1999 Psycho remake of, like, Disney animated properties. But again, separate conversation that we're not going to get ourselves drawn into here. But generally speaking, I like Favreau. He seems like he's a pleasant guy. He's got a nice head in his shoulders. And like, he seems amicable. And I'm like, sure, he's making a boatload of money and he's living his childhood dream. Sure, let him do that. I can't really begrudge him that. And so I'm like, let him do that. And people seem to enjoy it. That's great. And even I, who am not entirely on board and didn't love it with all my heart, was like, this is a fairly passable way to spend 45 minutes every week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, and it looks great. The production's fantastic. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have expectations for The Mandalorian, but I wanted to continue. Like, the worst case scenario is I wanted to continue as it was, which is, this is the memory of Star Wars, but at least we're doing something with new characters, new worlds, new ideas, and in a new context, you know?
Sure.
That's, and if I were pushing it, and if I were cheeky, and if I were getting demanding, being just a little bit insistent, I'd be like, John, what do you really want to do? Like, what is your, like, what's your, if nobody was watching, what would you do with The Mandalorian?
What would you make?
Yeah.
And, you know, like,
if you didn't have to answer to Disney shareholders or stockholders, if you weren't going to be drawn into a board meeting afterwards, what would your Star Wars show look like? That's what I want, John. I don't know why I'm talking to John as if he's like my camera.
John, are you listening, John? I feel like, to me, I feel like a lot of season 1 of The Mandalorian was that, because it wasn't hyper fan focused. Like, even though, yes, it's very standard, it's exactly what anyone who's been around a Star Wars anything for a while will expect, but it wasn't the
Boba Fett and
the rise of Skywalker. Yeah. It wasn't Boba Fett being a badass. It was, I feel like that was them off in their own corner, making their weirdo Star Wars thing with nobody looking, but now everybody's looking, and that gets me worried. Yeah. And
that does make me nervous. That actually genuinely does, which is a shame. But hey, maybe again, we haven't seen it. Maybe it'll be brilliant. Maybe all of a sudden, like, he'll do something with Boba Fett, and I'll be like, that makes sense. That is better than what has been done with Boba Fett before. That is a work of genius. I don't know how he figured out those depths were there. I don't know where he drew them from. Yes, but they are just perfect. I will never look at Boba Fett the same way again. Like, and maybe Favreau can do that. Maybe he'll be like, maybe now when I'm watching Empire Strikes Back, I'll be like, damn, were the seeds of Mandalorian Boba Fett sown that early?
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing the little things that he can pick up on. Yeah. What the other thing I will just say on a positive note, I am mostly behind the camera. I'm a bit of a gearhead. I'm a bit of a technology nerd, and the things they are doing on the production end of The Mandalorian is absolutely fantastic, and a template for how we should be making modern CG heavy blockbusters. I don't know if anyone listening has seen some of the behind the scenes, but they don't film The Mandalorian on large green screens. They film them in front of a giant curved LCD screen. And they have people on set literally placing digital rocks and rendering the background while they are filming as like a digital props department, because like there's no way you can green screen out his very reflective gear, and everything looks fantastic. And so like watching the post-production side of thing, or just the regular production side of thing, the behind the scenes of it is very exciting to me as someone who's interested in gear and how things are made.
Yeah, and even just like, again, one of the big arguments about the prequel trilogy was the excessive use of CGI and the way in which it pushed the franchise into the uncanny valley. And again, part of me is like, it's interesting that the Star Wars trilogy goes from film to digital back to film, in terms of like nostalgia, in terms of the broader context of like, this is how you remember Star Wars being, so this is how it will always be. But one of the things that I do really admire about The Mandalorian is the way in which it blends that work that you mentioned with practical work. Like, Baby Yoda, or the child, if we're feeling very puritanical in how we describe it, let's just call it Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda is amazing because it is like an actual physical prop. I remember, like, Werner Herzog has apparently talked about how he would yell at Disney about using an actual physical prop, and he was entirely correct. The fact that it is tactile, the fact that
use the puppet, you cowards!
You cowards!
That's his quote: "Is use the puppet, you cowards!" And they all said, "Okay, Werner, no."
No, nobody wants to upset Werner Herzog. Like that's if we want to be honest, that's my biggest disappointment about season 2 is that it's highly unlikely Werner Herzog will be back. Unfortunately, it's like I feel like the Baby Yoda Werner Herzog press tour was the best Star Wars thing since The Empire Strikes Back. Let's be honest. But no, I mean more seriously though, it is the fact that the object has mass. And the fact that the puppet exists and the child is there. And that use of, obviously there's a lot of CGI there, but it's used in the way that good CGI is, which is to enhance and illustrate and to draw details that would not be physically possible in practical sense, and to enrich the actual physical texture of the world. So like I think in terms of production, it's staggering. It's one of the best looking shows on television right now, easily. And that's a credit to absolutely everybody who works on it. To be clear, in case it sounds like I've been negative Nelly or being complaining or whining.
No, well, and I just like it that like we're finally becoming comfortable with CG. Deadpool's eyes as compared to Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man eyes. Like we're starting to figure out where CG is appropriate, how it can be used with physical interactive objects. We're getting to that point where everything is flowing really nicely, and The Mandalorian is a nice distillation of where we are currently, the lessons we've learned with all CG things versus all practical things, and a nice blend of the both. And so like I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just don't mess it up. Like
I don't think he will mess it up, to be fair. Like, to give Favreau some credit, I do not see massively screwing it up being a thing that Favreau will do. I do see maybe letting it coast being a thing, or letting it drift.
That's like I feel like to me this is very similar. I mentioned it earlier to Stranger Things, where it's like that season 1 of Stranger Things was something incredibly special and unique, and every season after that has been perfectly fine and adequate, but not season 1. And so like to me, like every time they say, oh, here's the new season of Stranger Things, it's like we could have just left it. Like we could have just had something really nice and perfect. Now, I'm not saying they're going to lower quality. They might improve. We might get something special, but I fear that it's just gonna be like, oh yeah, that's still good. I guess I'll watch next season, or I won't.
Jack, like, and again, this is probably one of those things about the Star Wars fan base. Do you ever imagine a world where the Star Wars fan base would react to something like, yeah, that's okay? Like, do you ever envisage there being a world where the Star Wars fandom says, you know what, it's not the best thing ever, it's also not the worst thing ever, it's kind of okay on the grand scheme of things, it's fairly okay? Wasn't
that how people reacted to The Force Awakens?
Ooh.
Now, this might be old man Jack not remembering, but if I remember correctly, a lot of the talk around The Force Awakens was like, well, it's pretty much the same story as A New Hope, but I like the things, and I hope they do something different with the next one. Like, I thought everyone was like, yeah, it's all right.
Thank goodness they didn't do something different with the next one, right? Am I right?
Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. It's what you asked for. You wanted them to do something different. But that's what I remember the general reaction to The Force Awakens being. I might be wrong.
I remember being much more positive now, to be fair. Okay. Like, obviously not during the core fan base. There was a very core group that was like, yep, they're just remaking the original Star Wars movie and they're not doing anything new. And it's, I remember my reaction then being, wasn't your complaint when they made the other Star Wars movies that they weren't just making A New Hope again, and they were making something new? And to be clear, there are problems with the prequels, but the fact that they do not perfectly recreate your memory of the classic 1977 Star Wars is not even like number 20 on the list of problems with the prequels. Like, just so we're clear. Right. Before I get like swept up in Darren loves the prequels, just
Darren's a prequel
apologist right there. Yeah, I'm not an apologist. Apology implies I have something to be sorry for, Jack.
Dang! No, it's like, yes, I don't want people to think like we're coming away really negative from the first season of Mandalorian, or that we're not hopeful of the new season of Mandalorian. It's just like there's a lot of factors, and unfortunately for people like you and I who read the rumors and pay attention to the business side of things and know stuff about the production side of things, there are a lot of factors that could play here, and which side wins or neither side wins, and it's just more of the same, good, positive,
Yeah.
We're just talking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we are just talking. I mean, I do honestly think that I suspect it. What you got in season 1 is what you will get largely in season 2. I
Mhm.
don't imagine. I suspect, and this is based purely on the way in which the first season was structured. The first season of The Mandalorian had a whole host of special guest stars from like Bill Burr and various other, even Giancarlo Esposito in the final 2 episodes, Werner Herzog. But it was all very clearly structured so that those characters were only around for largely bite-sized segments of the season. You had more important recurring characters like the character played by Carl Weathers or various other characters as well. But most of those guest stars were single episode guest stars. That sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
And I suspect that Ahsoka and Boba Fett will largely be the same in that I do not imagine that they will dominate the arc of the season. I do not think that it will turn out that they are going to be in all 8 episodes all the time. I imagine there will be an episode where Ahsoka appears, and they might make a big deal of her there, and she might come back for the finale. There'll be an episode where Boba Fett appears, and this is just speculation, to be clear, I do not know anything, but he will be revealed to be alive in the finale. That I can see happening, but I think most of the season will be very similar to the first season. It'll be a series of roughly episodic adventures where it's like, okay, this week we're doing, I don't know, what haven't we done? We'll do like a train heist one week, for example. Or we'll do like a Yojimbo homage another week because we did
Hold on,
Samurai.
let me pull out my trade paperback of Lone Wolf and Cub. Let's see what we got here. Did we do an episode where he proves how manly he is by sexually pleasuring a woman in front of bandits? That's something that happens in the Lone Wolf and Cub comic.
John,
books,
put your comic away.
Oh,
John,
you know?
John, put your comic away. It's like, this is what happened on Iron Man 2. But no, like I do genuinely, I expect that it will be largely the same sort of structure, and that's not a bad thing.
And like season 1 was also filled with fantastic new characters. I'm thinking of Taika Waititi's assassin droid, who was a fantastic little character.
Nick Nolte's character, who I absolutely loved,
whose name I don't remember, but the guy who said the thing. The guy who said I have spoken, and everyone loved that. He was a great character.
Yeah, Kuhl, by the way, is his name as well. Yeah, Werner Herzog's the client, who I absolutely loved as well. Even though he primarily existed just to be German and ominous, in case you don't get the subtext of what the Empire represents. We have a creepy old German dude talking about how things used to be different.
Chef kisses everywhere. Give me that in the new season. Give me fun, interesting characters for our blank slate Mandalorian to bounce off of. Give me Baby Yoda doing more weird things like eating frogs. I'm happy. That's all I want.
That is, and I don't think it will be too much different than that. So I guess the final question is then, so what do we think? Like, okay, so they did a Prison Break. So what do we think the Western trope episode is going to be? I think it's got to be train robbery. That's what I think. I think like one of the episodes has to be a train robbery. And then the other one is they did Seven Samurai. So one of the episodes is probably going to have to be a Kurosawa reference. I think it's probably going to be a Yojimbo episode. But do you have, what would be your, so do you have any, like, what do you think we'll see in terms of like what the show does outside of like continuity? Just in general.
I have it. And to me, I'm pulling from Lone Wolf and Cub because that's where they're pulling a lot from. There will be an episode in which someone kidnaps Baby Yoda, not realizing that he's being watched over by Mando, so Mando can do badass things to get him back.
That's I think that we'll see that sooner or later.
We have to see that if we're going to pull from Old West, like they already did, like, should the Mando settle down in the quiet town?
Yeah. No more guns in the valley, Jack. No more guns in the valley. They've done like the prison break from the law sequence. They've done the kind of like the you're not welcome in this town anymore, Mando. Sort of like showdown standoff thing where he comes into town and he's got to leave. So,
and I suppose the prison break it also goes along the genre of having to do one more bad thing even though you're a good guy now. Yeah. I suppose that fits in that genre. I'm trying to remember just other general kind Western tropes
that we could kind of throw in there.
which is really tough because of course they're just like watered into everything now.
Yeah. I mean, could he be made a sheriff of a small town? I know it's kind of similar to the Seven Samurai thing, but it's a slightly different one where he like ends up being like the law in a small town or something. I wonder if you could
that's kind of the settle down in the town episode ish, but yeah, I could see that. The other thing that we could put out there just for pure speculation is what we got. The final reveal at the end of season 1 was the dark saber.
Yeah.
So what other incredibly obscure Star Wars reference are they going to pop out at some point? I suppose like the assassin droid is also a very obscure Star Wars character or Star Wars thing, right?
Yeah.
And so is there another like super obscure Star Wars thing?
Like deep cut kind of moment that you could do.
Right. But really who knows? I'm trying to remember the name. I don't know if you read any of the newer
Padme
Marvel...
is still alive, and Taika Waititi has brought back his best friend Natalie Portman for the season finale.
Wouldn't Natalie Portman is kind of in good talks with Disney right now, and like Jon Favreau's there, like he could be like, just come on, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We just need you for a cameo. No, we'll pay a dump truck full of money, or we'll donate it all to charity. We don't care. Just come be in 5 minutes of our thing.
I do wonder though, if we might see another Darth Maul resurrection now that we have a popular live action franchise. Like that's my concern. It's like, well, we did resurrect him already for the animated show, but that's, not everybody watched that. People like Darth Maul, he's a cool design. What if, and hear me out, we resurrect him again?
Well, and of course he showed up there at Solo.
Yeah.
So like canon. Darth Maul, robot spider leg Darth Maul is canon.
Yeah.
I personally would love to see that. I think just because I think it would be very silly.
I can imagine trying to explain that to people who haven't watched the Clone Wars or like read a Wikipedia article on it. It's like, didn't he get chopped in half in like the one way back in 1999? It's like, yes, and as you can see, a lot has happened since then.
In the Darth Vader comics, the more recent Marvel Darth Vader comics, which take place in between
A New Hope and Empire, is it?
A New Hope and Empire, which is a fantastic series.
This is the Gillen one, the Kieran Gillen one, which is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, love the Kieran Gillen.
Oh yeah, no, really like does a very good job of both like showing how badass Darth Vader is, but also grounding him like as a real character who's not Jason Voorhees. Like, but is like a real character with powers, yes, but a limit to his powers.
And
I'm
also lots of temper tantrums. Lots and lots of temper tantrums.
Which is very fair because he is a diva. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of his little assistant. Maybe she'll make a comeback.
Oh, Dr. Alfra.
Yes.
Oh, or his evil C-3PO buddy. Or his torture droid. His C-3PO torture droid. Like the super polite galactic torture droid.
Yes!
Like
that would be fantastic.
The evil mirror universe versions of R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Well, we already got evil R2-D2 in Rogue One.
Yes. Oh. How long until C-3PO shows up?
Oh, fuck you.
Sorry. I realize the longer this goes, it's just going to make you feel worse. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that just makes me feel... That's it. We'll end it there because, yes, he will... I'm going to say they're going to save that for season 3, though, but he absolutely will, and it'll explain how he got his red leg.
His red arm.
His red arm, yes. It'll explain how he got his red arm. The Mando will blow off his arm.
Yeah.
Yes. Dang it.
That's the parsecs. Take that, James Robinson, and your comic book explaining it. Canon rank. Boom.
No. I think that's a fine discussion of potential Mandalorian and just Star Wars in general. We got a lot off our chest. Hopefully we won't have to talk about it too much. Oh, wait, new episodes are coming out. We'll probably deal with them. Okay, that's great. It's fucking Star Wars.
I enjoyed that conversation.
I did.
I hope listeners did as well, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, no, it was a little rambly, but I think there's a lot of meat in there, and hopefully we got our points across very nicely. I will say thank you for listening to this and or watching this. We do appreciate it. Thanks for showing up to our new Escapist Movies channel, where right now you can see, of course, the Escapist Movie Podcast, and we will be dumping all of Darren's Into the Frame episodes, which are all fantastic, and we love them all. And very soon we will have 3-minute movie reviews by both myself and Darren, and we're looking for new contributors right now to add to our 3-minute movie review team. It's very exciting.
Thank you. I do like that you use the verb dump. I really appreciate it.
Well,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, it is. I'm really proud of them. And again, they're all edited by the wonderful Omar Ahmed, who is absolutely fantastic. All the good stuff in those videos is down to Omar. All the terrible stuff is me. So yeah, no, it really is. And I'm very, very proud of how they've turned out. So thank you.
No, they're fantastic watches and or listens. So yes, look forward to more stuff here on our Escapist Movie channels. And for now, goodbye.
Bye.